We live in a world that moves fast. A world where being the loudest voice in the room is often mistaken for leadership, and where speaking first is seen as being confident, bold, assertive. We're encouraged to share, post, comment, and broadcast our every thought. Somewhere along the way, we started believing that silence is a void that must be filled. That if we're not talking, we're not contributing. That if we're not sharing, we're not being seen. But here's the truth. Silence, real silence, is not emptiness. It's not absence. It's not weakness. It's power. It's restraint. And restraint is the form of wisdom. We often think of strength in visible terms. Muscle, volume, presence. But the strongest people I've ever met are rarely the loudest. They're the ones who have learned the discipline to pause, to think, to listen, to absorb. They're not absent from the conversation, they're deeply present. But they choose when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. There is an incredible power in resisting the urge to react. Think about the last time someone said something that irritated you, challenged your beliefs, or hurt your feelings. That instinct you had to snap back, to correct, to defend, we've all felt it. It's a very human response. But what separates the wise from the impulsive is the moment between stimulus and response. That moment, that space is where strength lives. Silence gives you space to process, not just react. And in that space, you're not just more composed, you're more human. I once sat across the table from a leader I greatly admire. We were discussing a difficult situation involving one of his team members. Emotions were high, the stakes were real, and people wanted answers. Everyone was talking. The room was noisy with opinion. But he sat still. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush. He just listened. When he finally spoke, and it was after a long pause, the room fell silent. Not because he raised his voice, but because his presence was grounded. His words had weight. He had taken the time to understand, to feel, and then to respond. That kind of leadership, it doesn't come from domination, it comes from discipline. But let's not confuse silence with suppression. This isn't about bottling everything up or pretending your emotions don't matter. It's about recognizing that not every thought is ready to be shared, that not every feeling needs to be validated externally. Some things deserve to be felt fully and privately. When we rush to express everything immediately, we often rob ourselves of the opportunity to understand what we're really feeling. We vent instead of reflect. We react instead of respond. We need to relearn the art of processing before speaking, not because silence is always better, but because it's often wiser. When we give ourselves permission to hold back, we're not hiding, we're choosing the right time, the right words, the right audience. That is strength. We also need to recognize that being silent does not make us passive. There is a difference between being silent and being silenced. One is a choice, the other is oppression. What we're talking about here is voluntary silence, the kind that comes from self-awareness and emotional intelligence, the kind that says, I know what I want to say, but I also know the impact it could have. The kind that says, I understand that speaking right now may serve me, but may not serve us. Imagine how our relationships would change if more of us practiced this. If we paused before speaking in anger, if we listened a little longer before offering advice, if we allowed space in our conversations for people to think and feel without immediately needing to fill the gap, silence creates room for depth. And in that room, empathy grows. In leadership, silence is often misunderstood as indecision or weakness. But the best leaders know that silence can be a strategy. When we listen without interrupting, we send a signal. You matter. I'm not just waiting for my turn to talk. When we refrain from sharing every opinion, we give others the space to share theirs. And when we hold our words until they are fully formed, we speak with more clarity, more conviction, and more influence. This isn't easy. Silence takes practice. It takes confidence to not always need to be heard. It takes humility to realize that you don't always have the answer and that sometimes someone else needs the space more than you do. It takes patience to allow a moment to pass without grabbing it. And it takes courage to say, not now. But when you do, when you learn to hold your tongue, not out of fear, but out of strength, something shifts. You begin to feel less reactive and more centered. You stop needing to prove yourself in every conversation. And people begin to notice. They start to lean in when you speak, not because you're always talking, but because when you do, it matters. We are constantly told to find our voice, and that's good advice. But just as important is knowing when to withhold that voice, not forever, not always, just long enough to be intentional. Long enough to make sure your words are not just a reaction, but a reflection of who you truly are. So yes, speak when it matters, but also honor the moments when silence serves better. Because in those moments, in those pauses, lies the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. The kind of strength that leads not from the front, but from within. We've created a culture where sharing has become synonymous with connection. We're told to put ourselves out there, to be open, to be real. The message is everywhere. Vulnerability is strength, authenticity is power, and visibility is value. And there's truth in that. But there's another truth, one we don't talk about enough. Not everything needs to be shared. There is a difference between being authentic and being exposed, between being open and being unfiltered. Somewhere along the way, we blurred the line between what is personal and what is public. We began to believe that if we're not constantly expressing ourselves on social media, in meetings and conversations, that we're somehow being dishonest. But the reality is, discretion is not deception. Some things are not meant for public consumption, not because they are shameful or wrong, but because they are sacred. And sacred things need space, not exposure. Think about how we treat our most precious possessions. We don't leave them out in the open for anyone to take or judge. We protect them, we safeguard them, we bring them out only when the moment calls for it. Why? Because value doesn't need to be proven through constant display. And the same is true for our thoughts, our stories, our emotions. Just because something is real doesn't mean it needs to be revealed. We often feel pressure to share everything we're going through, our struggles, our opinions, our daily highs and lows, as if putting it all out there is the only way to feel seen. But sometimes in our rush to be seen, we overlook the power of being still. Some of the most profound experiences we go through aren't ready to be spoken about. They're still forming and still teaching us something. Speaking too soon can interrupt that process. It's like digging up a seed before it's had time to take root. There's wisdom in waiting, in letting things grow quietly, unseen, until they are strong enough to face the light. I once sat with someone who had just come through an incredibly painful experience, the kind that changes you. And instead of telling the whole story, they simply said, "I'm not ready to talk about it." There was so much strength in that sentence. Not because they were hiding, but because they were honoring what they had gone through. That's a form of integrity, knowing your limits, protecting your story, giving yourself permission to process privately. It takes more courage to hold back than to spill it all. Because holding back requires presence. It requires you to be in tune with yourself, to know when speaking serves you and when it doesn't. This doesn't mean we shouldn't be open. It means we should be intentional. The best conversations aren't the ones where we say everything. They're the ones where we say the right thing at the right time in the right place. That takes discernment. And discernment begins with the question, why am I sharing this? Am I seeking connection or am I seeking validation? Am I trying to add value or am I trying to relieve my own discomfort? Am I being brave or am I being impulsive? We all have moments when we want to speak just to release the tension inside us, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're human. But when every thought becomes a post, when every emotion becomes a performance, we start to lose something essential. We lose depth. We lose privacy. And sometimes we lose the very connection we were seeking in the first place. Connection doesn't require constant updates. It requires trust. And trust isn't built by volume. It's built by consistency and care. When you share too much too quickly, you can overwhelm the relationship instead of deepening it. Relationships, whether personal or professional, thrive on balance. When someone reveals too much too soon, it can feel less like intimacy and more like a boundary violation. And on the flip side, when someone chooses to share gradually with thought and timing, it creates a sense of safety. You begin to understand this person respects themselves, and that makes it easier to respect them too. We've also confused transparency with truth. Being transparent means you're willing to be seen, but being truthful means you're willing to be honest when it matters. And the truth is, some moments are not meant to be narrated. They are meant to be lived fully and quietly. You don't need to write a caption about everything. You don't need to explain every decision. Silence doesn't mean you're hiding something. It often means you're building something. Something private, something meaningful, something not yet ready for the world. We need to stop measuring our authenticity by how much we reveal. Your worth is not tied to how much of your personal life is on display. Some of the most real people are the ones who choose their words carefully, who protect their inner world with intention, who understand that not everything needs to be shared, not because it's unimportant, but because it's important enough to be kept close. There is dignity in discretion. There is leadership in restraint. And there is wisdom in knowing that what you keep to yourself often shapes who you become more than what you tell others. Growth isn't always visible. Healing doesn't always come with a hashtag. And strength doesn't always make a sound. So the next time you feel the pull to explain yourself, to share something vulnerable before it's ready, or to be louder just to be noticed, pause. Ask yourself if your silence might serve you better than your words. Ask yourself if your story still needs time to become whole. Because not everything needs to be shared. And when you learn to honor that boundary, you don't shrink, you expand. You become more centered, more self-aware, more grounded. And in that groundedness, you become someone others can trust. Not because you've told them everything, but because what you do share is offered with care, with clarity, and with purpose. There's something sacred about a thought in its earliest form. It's fragile. Raw, still becoming. It hasn't yet hardened into certainty or been shaped by outside influence. It's like a flame, small and flickering, capable of lighting a fire, but easily snuffed out by a careless gust of wind. And yet, in today's world, we often feel pressure to express our thoughts the moment they form, to turn them into content, arguments, confessions, as if they only matter once they've been spoken aloud. But the truth is, your thoughts deserve a safe space, a space where they can grow, stumble, evolve, and mature before being judged or broadcast. We've all been in situations where we've said something out loud before we truly understood what we meant. Sometimes it comes out awkward. Sometimes it comes out harsher than intended. Sometimes it doesn't come out at all the way we imagine. That's because not all thoughts are ready for the world. And when we rush them, we don't give them the chance to find their true shape. It's easy to forget that thinking is a process, a real process, not something that happens instantly or effortlessly. It takes time to connect dots, to test ideas against our values, to notice how we feel about what we think. But when we're constantly reacting, constantly sharing, we short-circuit that process. We trade depth for immediacy. And over time, we lose something important, the ability to sit with our own minds long enough to truly understand them. We live in a culture of instant opinions. Something happens, and we're expected to have a take, immediately, publicly, passionately. But quick opinions are rarely thoughtful ones. They're often just emotional surges. And if we're not careful, we become so addicted to expressing them that we forget to question them. That's where things get dangerous, not because expressing thoughts is bad, but because when everything is said without being understood, we stop learning. We stop growing. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes from thinking quietly, from letting your thoughts live inside you for a while, from watching how they move through you. Some thoughts are worth holding on to in silence. Not forever, but just long enough to see where they lead. Long enough to ask, is this really what I believe? Or is this just what I've been conditioned to believe? Long enough to notice, where is this thought coming from? Fear, ego, empathy, hope. When we speak too soon, we risk fixing a thought before it's ready. We stamp it with permanence. We post it, we declare it, we defend it. But what if we had waited just a little longer? What if we had given ourselves permission to explore it more fully? We might have discovered a better version of it, or maybe even changed our minds entirely. But now, because it's out there, we feel obligated to stand by it. That's how good people end up digging into bad ideas, not because they're arrogant, but because they didn't give themselves enough room to think. One of the most powerful habits a leader or any person can develop is the ability to say, I don't know yet. Not because they're uncertain, but because they respect the complexity of thought. Because they understand that clarity takes time. In fact, some of the wisest people I've met are also the most cautious about sharing what they think. Not because they're secretive, but because they treat their mind like a workshop, not a stage. We need more of that. More people who are willing to think in private before speaking in public. More people who are curious enough to sit with their thoughts before unleashing them. More people who understand that silence isn't an absence of thought, it's a sign of someone taking their thoughts seriously. It's not just about protecting yourself, it's about respecting yourself. Because your thoughts, especially the tender ones, are part of who you are. And they deserve a safe space. A space without judgment, without performance, without pressure. Maybe that space is a journal. Maybe it's a long walk. Maybe it's a quiet moment before the world wakes up. Whatever it is, it's yours. And in that space, your thoughts get to breathe, they get to stumble, they get to become. And here's the beautiful part. When we give ourselves that space, we also create better spaces for others. Because when you treat your own thoughts with care, you're more likely to treat others' thoughts the same way. You stop expecting people to always be polished. You start listening for what's behind the words. You give people the grace to figure things out as they speak. That's how trust is built, not through perfection, but through patience. We often think that speaking is how we make things real. But thinking is where we begin to make things true. Before you ever say the words, the meaning is being shaped in silence. That space matters, that pause matters, that internal dialogue, the one no one else hears, is where the most honest part of us lives. It's not something to rush through, it's something to honor. So the next time you feel the urge to speak a thought just because it's loud in your head, pause. Ask yourself, is this thought ready to be shared? Or does it still need time to teach me something? And if the answer is the latter, give it that time. Let it unfold. Let it wrestle with you. Let it challenge you. Because when it finally does reach the world, it will be stronger, it will be clearer, and it will be something you're proud to have said, not just because it sounded good, but because it came from a place of truth. Your thoughts are not just ideas, they are seeds, and every seed needs soil, quiet, and time before it becomes something that can stand on its own. Don't deprive your mind of that process. Give your thoughts the safe space they deserve, because from that space, the best of you will grow. Trust is one of those words we all use, but few of us pause to truly understand. We say things like, trust me, or you can count on me, as if trust is something that can be handed over with a promise. But real trust doesn't work that way. It's not given just because we ask for it. It's not earned through big, dramatic gestures. Trust is built slowly, quietly, over time. It's not about what you say, it's about what you consistently do. We live in a time where everything is about perception, where people share their best moments, their polished opinions, their curated selves. We've mistaken visibility for vulnerability and exposure for intimacy. But trust isn't built through declarations. It's built through alignment. When what you say matches what you do, when your words and your actions begin to echo each other again and again, until people start to believe that what they see is who you truly are. Sometimes, in our need to be accepted or understood, we overshare. We disclose too much, too quickly. We rush to tell our story in full, thinking that if people just knew everything about us, they'd feel closer to us. But the truth is, dumping information isn't the same as building connection. You can tell someone every detail of your life and still feel completely misunderstood. Because connection isn't created through volume, it's created through intention. And trust doesn't grow from how much you reveal, it grows from how much you live what you reveal. I've seen leaders who speak constantly about transparency, about culture, about values, and yet their teams don't trust them. Not because they're dishonest, but because their behavior doesn't back up their words. They say people first, but make decisions that put profits ahead of people. They say we're a family, but create environments where no one feels safe to speak. The disconnect isn't in the message, it's in the inconsistency. And trust cannot survive inconsistency. On the other hand, I've seen people of few words who inspire deep trust. Not because they're loud or charismatic, but because they're reliable. They do what they say they'll do. They show up, they listen, and they don't need to announce their trustworthiness. You just feel it. Because trust is a feeling. It's emotional. It's not something you declare. It's something you create in others, one moment at a time. We have to understand that trust is not built in grand moments. It's built in small, almost invisible ones. The text you send to check in on someone. The time you show up early just because you respect the other person's time. The way you keep a confidence even when there's no one watching. These are the building blocks. And over time, they form the foundation of a relationship where people feel safe. Not because they've been told they're safe, but because they've experienced safety. People often think that to be trusted, they need to be impressive. But trust isn't about impressing people. It's about reassuring them. It's about being consistent, not extraordinary. It's about being someone others can rely on when things are uncertain. That's why the most trusted people are often the ones who don't feel the need to prove themselves all the time. They understand that trust is built when others feel seen, heard, and respected, not overwhelmed by their presence. There's also something important to understand about timing. Trust grows slowly, but can be lost quickly. And when we overexpose ourselves, especially too early in a relationship, we can unintentionally create discomfort. Vulnerability is powerful, but only when it's rooted in relationship. If I barely know you and you tell me your deepest secrets, I might feel confused, even uneasy. But if we've built a foundation and you open up, I'll feel honored. That difference isn't about the content. It's about the content. Our trust is about timing. It's about knowing when someone is ready to receive a piece of you and when you are truly ready to share. We also need to be honest about our own relationship with trust. Are we asking for it without giving it? Are we expecting people to believe in us before we've shown them who we really are? And perhaps most importantly, are we trying to force trust instead of fostering it? Because when we try to rush trust through oversharing, over-explaining, or over-promising, we create pressure. And pressure rarely creates safety. It creates suspicion. Building trust also means accepting that you can't be everything to everyone. Not everyone will trust you. And that's okay. Trust is not universal, it's relational. It's something you build with one person at a time based on shared experiences, honest interactions, and emotional safety. And the more we try to earn everyone's trust all at once, the more we dilute our authenticity, because trust doesn't require perfection, it requires congruence. You don't need to be flawless, you just need to be real. So instead of asking, how can I get people to trust me, maybe the better question is, how can I become more trustworthy? That shifts the focus from performance to presence, from image to integrity, from impression to intention. And when you start living with that mindset, something powerful happens. You stop needing to convince people. They start seeing it for themselves. It's easy to say all the right things. It's harder to live them. But people notice. Over time, they always do. So let your actions be the loudest part of your message. Let your consistency speak more than your charisma. Let your presence, not just through your words, be the reason people feel safe around you. Trust isn't built through noise. It's built through rhythm, through repetition, through quiet moments of honesty, reliability, and care. And when you understand that, you stop trying to broadcast trust. You simply start living in a way that earns it. There's something captivating about people who don't reveal everything at once. You've probably met someone like that. The kind of person who speaks thoughtfully, who listens more than they talk, who doesn't rush to fill silence with noise. They carry themselves with calm, not because they're holding something back out of fear, but because they've chosen to preserve something, their privacy, their pace, their peace. And when they speak, you lean in. Not just because of what they say, but because of what they don't say. That is the quiet power of mystery. We often misunderstand mystery. We think it means being secretive, closed off, or evasive. But real mystery isn't about hiding. It's about holding something sacred, something intentional, something not meant for everyone. It's about understanding that not all of who we are needs to be revealed to be understood. Sometimes what we choose not to share, because the very thing that gives weight to what we do share. We live in a time where the expectation is full disclosure. Share your story, tell the world your journey, be transparent, be vulnerable, be visible. And yes, there's beauty in openness, but there's also strength in restraint. Because when everything is on display, nothing feels special. The more we expose, the more we risk diluting the meaning behind the message. Sometimes the most compelling thing you can do is leave space. Let people wonder, let people discover, let people earn the deeper parts of who you are. Mystery isn't manipulation, it's maturity. It's recognizing that just because something is true doesn't mean it's time. Just because a thought is valid doesn't mean it's complete. Just because you feel something deeply doesn't mean it's ready to be understood by someone else. Holding something close isn't a sign of distance, it's a sign of discernment. Have you ever noticed how the most impactful leaders often say the least? They don't flood rooms with words. They use pauses, they listen. They let silence work for them, not against them. They understand that presence doesn't come from how loud you are, it comes from how intentional you are. That mystery, that space between what people know about you and what they sense about you, creates trust, intrigue, and respect. When someone reveals everything right away, we might feel curious at first, but it often fades. There's no journey left, no discovery, no unfolding. So when someone shares themselves piece by piece, when they hold certain parts back until trust is built, until connection is formed, we pay attention. Not because we're being teased, but because we're being invited. And invitations carry weight. They say, you've earned this part of me. Mystery also allows space for reflection. When you don't rush to define yourself to others, you give yourself room to discover yourself. Because who you are is not static, it's evolving. And if you share everything too soon, you might end up protecting a version of yourself that no longer fits. But when you keep parts of your story close, not hidden, just sacred, you give yourself permission to keep growing without needing to constantly explain yourself. This isn't just about people, it's about ideas too. Some of the most powerful ideas take time to ripen. If you share them too soon, before you've tested them, before you've questioned them, they can fall flat. But when you let them mature, when you sit with them, refine them, live them, they come out stronger, more grounded, more believable. That's the discipline of mystery. Resisting the urge to reveal everything in the name of speed or validation. We also underestimate how empowering it is to not explain yourself. To walk into a room and not feel the need to justify your choices, your feelings, your identity. Not out of arrogance, but out of peace. Because when you're secure within, you don't need constant approval from without. You know who you are even if not everyone else does. That confidence is magnetic. It draws people in, not because you've told them everything, but because what little you've shared carries depth. It matters. Mystery isn't about silence. It's about substance. It's about choosing what to say, when to say it, and why it matters. The more intentional we become about what we reveal, the more value we give to the things we do reveal. That's what makes mystery so powerful. It creates meaning, and meaning is what people remember. This applies in relationships, in leadership, and in life. You don't have to share every detail to be understood. You don't have to tell your whole story to be respected. You don't have to bare your soul to be authentic. You just have to show up consistently, with depth, with care, with the understanding that who you are isn't defined by what others see, it's defined by how well you live what they. And here's the paradox. When you embrace mystery, you actually connect more deeply. Because mystery invites curiosity. Curiosity builds engagement. Engagement builds trust. And trust opens the door for true intimacy, not forced, not performed, but earned, slowly, meaningfully, honestly. So instead of asking yourself, what do I need to share for people to like me? Ask yourself, what is mine to keep? That simple shift changes everything. It gives you back your power. Because the parts of you that remain unspoken, those are the roots. That's where your integrity lives. That's where your strength grows. And when you're rooted, you don't need to shout to be heard. There's beauty in being known, yes, but there's also beauty in being discovered. One moment at a time, one conversation at a time, one act of trust at a time. Let people earn the deeper parts of who you are. Let them walk the journey of knowing you. Let your presence, your thoughtful, grounded, authentic presence, be the loudest thing in the room. Mystery is not the absence of clarity. It's the presence of intention. And when you lead with that, you don't just influence people, you inspire them to slow down, to listen more deeply, to be more thoughtful in their own lives. And that is power.